This week on Around the Coin, we talk about Apple's acquisition of Beats by Dre for $3.2 billion, the failure of Square Wallet, and what Square Order must do to become successful in an already crowded space of mobile ordering applications. Around the Coin.
All right, guys, how's everyone doing today? Today is May 25th, Sunday, 9:30 in the morning, and Brian, Faisal, and myself are here, excited to talk about some payment and news-related issues. How you guys doing?
Doing good. Wonderful. How about yourself?
Great. Fantastic. Excited. We've got some big news recently. One of the most entertaining, Brian, I thought was what we talked about a little before the show was the Dr. Dre and Apple deal worth $3.2 billion that would have made Dr. Dre, or will potentially, with an asterisk, make Dr. Dre the first billionaire rapper. Brian, you've been, I know you've dabbled in the music industry a bit. What have you done in the past, and what do you think of this from your expertise or industry experience? You think this is just a smoke show, or is this a real threat to the deal?
Well, this is bit complex for me because I'm a reader of Apple patents for a very long time, and this correlates with that. I'm a study of Steve Jobs and Apple and the culture he built there. And I also know Jimmy and Dre indirectly, and probably Jimmy more directly, and just being around the industry. And so where do I want to jump in here? First off, when the rumor started, I did a 2-day count. I think it was a Thursday or Friday night. And I said, by Monday morning, either Dre's going to be coming out and saying, I made a terrible mistake. It was just a joke, and I disregard. And the reason for that is because there is a very large investor group behind that company called the Carlyle Group. And they essentially bought what was HTC's investment in Beats. And the unfortunate thing is HTC would probably likely sold too early, but that's a side issue. Carlyle would have recognized the fact that any even indirect rumor that didn't come true, that didn't have real meat, would devalue that company immensely. And there'd be no way to fix it. It would always be injured. So, and these are very intelligent people behind Carlyle Group. If you look at the roster of investors and operators within a company, they are very well known in politics. So they do understand media.
I mean, what do these guys do? Are these the guys that you see on TV that are coming up behind you and saying, you got to do exactly like what we say, or else? I mean, what's their real threat? Because I feel like it'd be interesting to sort of pull back that veil a little bit and say, what is it really like for these guys at that scale? I think a lot of people have exposure to small, medium-sized businesses, especially in tech, but at that scale, what happens? I mean, what are they doing to them?
Everything is pretty well thought out. With the creative people like Dre and Jimmy, you're going to see a little bit looseness, but at the end of the day, you're answering to people who really do understand how media plays on things and how the narratives are translated. And there's a few startup companies that get that, and they try to control narratives very intently. It's hard within the blogging community of tech, but they usually get away with it. And we'll talk about those companies that got away with the narrative, canceled products and stuff. But, getting back to Dre, you look at Dre and you say, well, why did he do that? Well, I think in his mind, indirectly, he was thinking just like what we do in the music industry. We leak things out. We leak songs on purpose. And we sometimes, unfortunately, create unusual events that the biggest event I can point out to that was a media construct was Britney Spears shaving her head and running around LA hitting people with umbrellas and going crazy. Or Miley Cyrus doing the twerk and tongue routine. These are things of desperation where you have to transition your career and you almost have to become a car crash.
But that's a little bit different, right? I mean, in the entertainment
to get
world,
attention. Your art doesn't attract attention anymore. Yeah, it's not just the entertainment world. I'm telling you, this is in every part of life now. We have fully enveloped this form of get attention by doing unusual things. And a lot of tech companies are starting to see this, and they do it indirectly and maybe on a more low-key way, more like Hollywood did it in the 1930s. So anyway, I'm not sure if that was conceived well, but guess what? We're talking about it. And the entire world is talking about
do you
Apple
think at that
Beats.
scale? Do you think at that scale there's really the mantra of no press is bad press? I'd have to believe that
Exactly.
Really though, I think I don't know. I think
Yeah.
Apple and Dre they want to do business at $3.2 billion.
No, I'm not saying Apple had anything. No, I don't think Apple had anything to do with it. I think Dre knew the deal was getting done, and there was nothing really to lose from it. I think in retrospect, he probably wouldn't have done it. I think Tim Cook is angry. I think a lot of the people that were key to it, and probably even Jimmy is pretty angry, and I'm certain Carlyle Group is angry. Because the chances of it backfiring were very, very high.
Really?
Now,
So
Apple's
you
got
think
a lot of things
from this one event? Do you think that the chances of the deal going down dropped significantly?
No, it's pretty much done. And by the way, you have to understand that Beats is an Irish company. This is all about how these companies are formed. And Apple has an Irish division, and there's a taxing basis in Ireland where essentially these deals go down at a really low taxing profile. If in fact Beats is sold for $3.2 billion in the United States, U.S. currency, it's going to translate as these two Irish subsidiaries transfer value, more like something under $2 million. So we're really talking about a lot less money, perhaps. And it's also, and why? Because Apple is using repatriated money, will wind up very likely using unrepatriated money in the transaction. But I don't want to go into that. There's financial angles to this that are unseen. So what are the reasonings? Well, we have this company that essentially targeted a very prime audience of young people, urban people with access to money, obviously, because Beats products were not inexpensive. And a very important segment that Apple has had a very large problem with, and that is early Android adopters who are on Android because they really see it as more of a bling phone than even an Apple device. And within the hip hop and rap community, you're going to see a lot more very large screen Android devices than you are going to see iPhones. In fact, that whole community.
Is this their move to essentially go down market?
No, it's more it's a very complex move, and so that's one element. So that's why this is so hard to grok for a lot of people, because they try to find the single reason, and you will never find the single bullet in this, even after the developer conference, June 2nd. So that's one aspect. You have people who have been able to, Dre and Jimmy have been able to reach into that market community and do phenomenal in building, a luxury brand.
Yeah.
Apple needs that. Apple has been very honest. How do you compete with tastemakers, very big rap muggles, and of course people listen to their music, hip hop, and it's pop culture.
Yeah,
there is an evaporation, and they know how to reach that audience.
Faisal, you've gave Faisal in the past. You've gave some really good insight as to the culture of different companies. I think you have a good sort of prediction or anticipation of what cultures would mend to. What do you think between Apple and Dre? In my mind, it seems to stand out that the two companies have clashing cultures, at least brands on the outside. What do you think? Do you think this will will this resonate well with the rest of the world outside of the States? And do you think the cultures will mesh together?
Well, it's a good question, but I honestly cannot answer if it's going to resonate well. Like, Brian says, it's a complex deal. I don't quite understand why, Dre's got a really good, brand, Beats, would partner up with Apple. I don't know what they'll get out of it. They were selling good as it is, unless the price is going to drop, which I doubt. Really can't put my finger on this one. I really can't.
Well, Mike, there's actually even more to this. Yeah, there's more to it. All right. So we definitely have the cultural awareness aspect, right? But we're also talking about a music streaming service, which is human curation. And I think a lot of the tech pundits are completely missing this and thinking that, oh, that's not a big deal. Let me tell you, it's a massive deal. Music discovery from the beginning of radio up until just the last 5 years. Well, let's put 10 years just to be, 100% accurate, was done by third parties. And let's call it radio. And most of us discovered music when we were younger by playlists that were assembled at radio stations. And if we're lucky, we got into eclectic playlists. If we weren't, we had top 40 playlists. But there was a tastemaker. What Beats Music is trying to do is trying to recreate that. And if you go in and sign up for the app, it really is talking about what mood are you in, where are you right now, and then as you're listening to things, whether or not certain music is resonating, and it starts curating. But there's people behind it, making connections between music that you can't do algorithmically today easily.
Better than Spotify, better than Pandora, though? It seems like those guys.
It has the potential of being massively better because Jimmy and Dre have access to tastemakers and people who understand music far better than a lot of these other systems. And Spotify is using algorithms primarily. It's human tweaked. Beats is primarily human curation. And there's something to be said about that. Now, is there IP, intellectual property behind this? Not really, but we're not talking about that space. We're talking about the creative space in LA, not the algorithmic space in Northern California. I mean, this is a completely different mindset, and which is another reason why it's confusing. And there's more deepness to this. Obviously, Jimmy has access to music executives and creative talent to the level of very few people. I can't really think of anybody that has so much access. And if we're still going to be entertained through music and television, Jimmy's crucial. And then finally, there's another aspect which I happen to think is relatively important, and a lot of people just don't get it. And that is Apple is going to eliminate the 3.5 millimeter audio jack on their devices in the future. And the only way they can successfully do that is they have to prove to some extent that Bluetooth wireless headphones and wireless devices are the future, and they make sense.
I have to believe we are so far out on that. Really close to it?
We're within the next two models,
wow.
Really perhaps even closer. Here's why. Look at the edge of your iPhone. Look at the things that define the edge of your iPhone being as thick as it is. If you're Johnny Ive and you're looking at that and you want to slim it down, the size of that jack is what's real. It's not so much, well, let's just eliminate it because we don't like it.
I'll give you that. I'll give you this one. They just about push the limits there.
No, you cannot. I've actually studied this intently. About 2 years ago, I wrote a report for a company I wish I could talk about, but I'm 100% barred about the elimination of the 3.5 mm. And if my predictions turn out to be the way I think they are, this company has saved themselves billions of dollars. And here's the thing. If Apple's future is to make a device that you and I want to own, they have to change it. It's just like any other product.
You've got to keep going. This is one of Apple's biggest criticisms, right? Is if you look at there's a comparison from the guys in Andreessen Horowitz on Google versus Glass, or Google versus Apple, and Glass is one of them that they're trying a
Glass
ton of
is a
stuff.
good example.
Transitioning into that, there's a really interesting article that came out a few days ago on Google Wallet is now available. Well, first of all, Google Glass is available to the mass market. So I assume you guys have both purchased, a few dozen of those.
I got one for every color, every mode. I won't be wearing glass anytime soon.
Outside the house, huh?
So what's that?
And I got a lot of junk.
You know what they're calling people who wear glasses now?
What's that?
Glass holes.
Glass holes, yes. So what's the price point? Around $1,500?
People even gave up.
Yeah, somewhere around
It's
that.
use case. It's actually use case. And Tim Cook sat in front of Kara Swisher at the last D event and basically said, I don't find most people wanting to put other than sunglasses purposely on their face, unless it's a very small segment that wants to fashionably look like they're maybe intelligent.
Here's the thing, Brian and Faisal, I'm sure you guys both realize this, is that in all wearables, I think first of all, there's a large component of how people look in their brand identity when they wear anything, any clothes, any jewelry. And now, they say the watch is dead. People have their cell phones, but the watch is still very much alive for the young population, just purely jewelry, right? It's the same purpose as an earring or a necklace or a bracelet. It's just something that looks great on you. I don't think people are using them as much. It's a statement. And I think the problem with wearables that they're going to really run into when they start hitting, true mass market and try to get outside the initial tech bubble or early adopters is people want uniqueness. They want to have something, special and new, right? Every girl loves to wear something that no one else is wearing. I think the same thing is going to be true, and maybe not as much for Google Glass because it's really it's something completely different. It's not really looked at as jewelry the way, say, a watch would be. But I think they'll really.
And that was the failure. Yeah. That was the failure of Glass. Well,
it hasn't failed. You can't say they failed yet. They literally just went public.
Okay. All right.
Weeks ago.
So let me tell you what I'm deeming as a failure. I'm deeming as a failure that they failed to get the mindset. Again, we were talking about Dre and Jimmy. They got people to buy over-the-ear headphones in mass and pay a few $100s for it, and they made it fashionable. All right. What Google did is approached it completely the wrong way. They tried to find nerd taste makers, which I would be one of them, and guys like Scoble and Robert Scoble and a few other people, and put them out in the world. And when Scoble was at, I think it was at a recent music conference. Maybe it was out in the desert, but in either case, he was sitting with a bunch of people, and as soon as somebody came up with Glass on, everybody said, there's one of those glass holes in front of us. Let's get out of here. Let's move away. And he said in that moment, he recognized just how large the gap is going to be for Google. And I've detected that the first time I saw them is because, they did it backwards. You should have found look what Apple's recent hires are. They're fashion people. And everybody in the tech world said, oh, these are light, fluffy, that doesn't matter type of hires. Well, these are the same type of hires that Steve Jobs would have done at this stage, because we're getting much more personalized. We're getting more zoned in on exactly what you talked about, Mike. Even people I come up to that claim that they don't have any brand are in fact brand conscious. They are trying to find the anti-brands. And so none of us are immune to this. I don't care who you are. You're about some kind of brand, even when you're anti-brand.
Oh,
you're making a statement.
So Faisal, let me ask you this. Faisal, if I gave you glasses, and beware, this might be a trick question, that, sunglasses you wear all the time, and you couldn't tell the difference between those and your normal glasses, and they had all the functioning capabilities of Google Glass, would there be any opposition to wearing them? I mean, would you think?
No, not at all. Because, I wouldn't wear Google Glass per se, but, like a competitor like, say, Epiphany Eyewear or something like that, definitely.
But if they got, people don't like Google Glass as it is today because you look like, Tron.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it'll evolve, right?
Yeah. If you have the design element to it, like, like my sunglasses, they look cool, etc. Why not? Absolutely.
I'm in agreement too.
In transitioning to the Google Wallet is coming to Glass. So now, theoretically, you can say something. You can make a hand. You nod your head, pay someone.
No, nod your head and pay somebody.
Right. That'll make for an interesting marketing campaign.
Yeah.
We're heading way close to what is coming out on Minority Report. That movie. Yeah. It's just like, I don't even know how fast technology is, jumping and with glasses and payments. I mean, I really can't see a use case right now en masse for wearing glasses and making a payment.
Neither can I, and I think it's just a solution chasing a problem. And we talk about wallets. I think we can talk about, the failures of wallets most recently, and, I don't want to be shy about it. The bottom, I'm a strong supporter of Square and incredibly talented people that work at that company, but they have had a massive failure with the Square wallet. And if you guys were to look at the TechCrunch coverage and all of the glowing predictions of 2011 and 2012 and 2013 of how Square is going to change a new way to pay, and if only we can get adoption, and it's just, and that's always just put out there like that's all that we need to do. Well, that's all that anything needs to get done.
Absolutely,
right,
everyone needs adoption, right? I mean, you have that, fine.
I sat in endless meetings of people glowing about this new way to pay. And by the way, there are some incredibly significantly important elements about Square Wallet. My heart breaks because they just absolutely cut the thing out of its existence instead of really understanding why it failed and failed so miserably.
Why did it fail?
No, you go back to the same year and you look at Venmo, you look at Duala, you look at Square Wallet, you look at the other solutions that were coming out, how easy it would be paid. The question is, which one do I take, right? And I'm not gonna take something that is not accepted by my colleagues, my peers, my merchants. And the easy way out was, PayPal, for example. I think PayPal will rule whether people like it or not. The others, very questionable. And Square was in that category.
Absolutely. And let's turn it upside down here. We're talking about fashion and brandability with the consumer. Big thing, important for consumer-facing systems. Exactly the opposite for merchant and business-related products. Square got it completely backwards. They thought they're going to drive adoption through consumer demand. And they figured, well, if we get enough people out there, we'll do sort of a Facebook, social network, Twitter thing, and there'll be so many people screaming that merchants will adopt. Absolutely false premise, absolutely wrong. And history has always proven those concepts wrong when it comes to business type of products and solutions. They even had students. This is how bad it got. This is how much you were drinking the Kool-Aid. They had student cheerleaders that would go out to businesses and say, have you heard of Square? Let me give you one of these, and I'll come to your store as a college student more if you would use this, and I want to pay with my name. And it was just, it was so naive. And I understand, you want to plant seeds in naivety, but for a company with the intelligence and some of the great ideas that I knew inside that company that were not expressed. If you ever read my stuff, some of my frustration is some of these things could have been identified early. Obviously,
Brian, let me ask you this:
people internally
what problem, or where did Square Wallet specifically fail in terms of Square's eyes? So if they think of Square Wallet's perceived success, what that looks like. Do they look at it as competition against Venmo, Duala, Square, PayPal rather, or do they look at it as, its own independent traction? They didn't get to the numbers they wanted to be at. Because you could look at Venmo and say, well, that's a success. That's the winner in the peer-to-peer, immediate transaction space, I guess, if you want to define it that way. Were they looking at direct competitors against that and saying, well, we just can't win against Venmo? Or do they look at it independent and say, we just couldn't make our numbers?
Well, basically all the above and more. I mean, basically, if you take a step back, the company's, sort of long-range goal was, we're not going to look at any competitors. We're not even going to look at the space. We're going to create the things that we want to use. And that kind of sounds great for some sort of products, but not business products. And again, that really comes down to the lack of identity within a company to understand what they were creating were business products. Let's look at Starbucks. Let's look at giving away Square card readers at Starbucks and completely confusing the community
of potential
users.
Did that happen outside of?
No.
They got thrown away. They literally, most of, and I mean most, because I actually have done empirical research in this, most card readers got dumped in dumpsters. They couldn't give them away. And it was just fodder for the Kool-Aid drinking, lapdog press that just wanted to write glowing stories about this. They did more damage to Square because of heightened expectations than probably any competitor could have done. So let's shift in. Where did it fail? Well, first off, it's a business product. So you need to establish the business relationship before you establish the consumer relationship, period. You can't do it simultaneously. You can't use it by social pressure. You can't get a 19-year-old college student to go into the local ice cream shop and say, we're not going to come in here unless you pay with our name. These actually turned businesses against Square in early days. And I know this because I've actually done the research. I've actually been in businesses doing research and watching these student cheerleaders come in and more or less immaturely almost try to muscle the business into accepting the Square wallet. And I don't know how officially they were endorsing that particular narrative. I do know they set them up with backpacks full of Square readers and say, be fruitful and multiply, hand these out like, dandelion seeds.
Sure.
And it was dumb. And you know that, Mike, because you've actually sold to businesses. So the failure was they didn't create, first off, a sales channel. They famously, every top executive and founder said, we don't hire salespeople. We don't want salespeople. We're eliminating salespeople. And that will go down when the final history is written about Square as being one of the massive for elements of failure within a company. That was extremely unintelligent position to make. And I tried very aggressively to try to clear that mindset very early on with my contacts, and officially and unofficially, and it hit a dead wall. So you don't get it. We're in a new world. Salespeople aren't required.
Brian, I'd say some of
Let's see how it works.
Some of your posts on Quora are just incredibly mind-boggling on Square specifically. And I have to wonder, how, number one, you find the energy to write about Square like no one else on this planet. The other thing is, do you think that Square how are they incentivized, or how are they influenced rather by their investors at Square? If your investor is Starbucks, if Howard Schultz sits on your board, Visa, MasterCard have influence in you, how does that change decisions that are made internal to that company? Do you think that they're freely autonomous and able to decide for themselves, or at this point, it doesn't feel like it?
Yeah, very complex at this point. And I can talk about maybe three Squares. The initial early Square, the genius of Jack Dorsey and Jim McLevy. Yeah, the very early days, incredibly brilliant. And the early days with Keith Rabois. I mean, those. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, Keith is a founder of Square, probably more materially important to that company than, unfortunately, the other founders to some degree. His early days in that company really changed its direction. Somewhere along the way, the Kool-Aid was served, and this heightened sort of insular state of mind started taking over, that we are disruptors. We are changing the world. We don't need to look at any history. We don't need to look at how anybody did anything. We're going to show and not say, and we're going to change the world. And that sounds really great until you understand that you're dealing with practical and pragmatic businesses, and they don't sway the way a consumer might, or the way you and I might jump on a new social network. You can't use that mentality with people who are competing day in and day out for their life. Literally, if you've spent some days with real merchants and you realize that if they've been 3 years into a cafe across the street from Starbucks, they're the Darwinian example of success, because they are competing with probably some of the most powerful marketers and strategists on the planet. And when you go and you basically say, oh, I got something really cool, and this doesn't just go for Square. I can probably name 99% of startups that are aiming towards small businesses. The biggest factor is they don't get it. So you go inside the company, you look at the board of directors, incredible board of directors. You got to ask yourself, what happened there? I don't know. I mean, I don't have an inside track on that. I do know some people on the board indirectly, but on the other side of that, there was a disconnect somewhere along the line when they started coming up with Wallet, and they didn't really think about scalability. How do you pay with your name in a grocery store, for example? If you're going to create something that's supposed to be ubiquitous, how do you do it at a grocery store? How do you do it at a restaurant when you're sitting at the table? I'm sitting at the table.
They're all different. Yeah, and that's what it comes down to.
That's right. So now you've already segmented your use of the wallet. Then you start segmenting it more and more and more, and then you start saying to yourself, hold it. maybe this isn't such a good idea. And there are elements of it that were phenomenal. And even the element of paying with your name could have been done in a manner that more is analogous to the way we actually pay today.
Do you think they went far enough through it? Do you think it was fully exercised and it is not meant to be at this point?
No, it was meant to be, but the will to want to change the world within a company is actually receded. And a lot of it had to do with fighting all these battles that were unwinnable. Finally, your will just gets sapped from you. You start going after, okay, let's do person-to-person payments. Nobody's done that before. Let's do Etsy-like market. Nobody's done that before. Let's do food ordering.
It just starts to now, diversify.
Let me ask you another question.
Not even diversify.
Is the U.S. ready for a mobile wallet? A ubiquitous mobile wallet.
Ubiquitous is going to be, sort of highly subjective. There are segments within business that is absolutely primed and ready to do mobile wallets, and we can see that with the vendor or the merchant unique mobile wallets in the case of Starbucks and Chipotle ordering system and wallet system. A lot of them are wrapped up into use cases that make significant logic for the user. Now, does that mean that that's the only answer? No. We talked about this a lot, about the universal wallet of what my iWallet might look like and what other wallets could look like if they became the API platform to build vendor-specific wallets on. And that, to me, is going to be one of those ways of attacking it. And in 2010, if and these conversations happened, if you were to ask me, how do we attack all this complexity of a mobile wallet, I would have said to Square, and I did, make an API that allows everybody to build on top of your incredible programming and infrastructure. Open it up so that everybody's joining you in this space. And then Apple would have acquired you, because you would have already done a lot of the legwork in 2010. Now we're almost approaching 2015, halfway, and it would have been in a massive movement forward. Instead, it was insular, and it was like our way or the highway, where we got a closed system. We want to have X control. That's what Steve would have done. And that's BS. Steve opened up the API, and we have the App Store to thank for it. So there's no Steve Jobs in this thinking. It was just unfortunately immature thinking. And now you have this boondoggle, a huge failure that has set mobile wallets and payments back probably 3 to 5 years. Because now you have reporters reporting that the mobile wallet isn't coming because the consumer is not ready. And that's BS. It's absolute BS, because their implementation failed. And everybody says, wow, that's cool, right? Find it, go around, ask people in the US. Hey, that knew about Square, did you like Square Wallet? Yeah, it's really cool. Did you use it? No. And then go down the road and ask all the questions why. And you'll even find out that they had opportunity to use it and they chose not to. And if you go down even further and you get honesty, you could start exposing and surfacing the things I discovered in 2011 when the device was the wallet.
So let me ask you this. So say this Square order becomes a success. The order on your phone, pick up at the restaurant or cafe. It's an extremely crowded space. I know I've lived it myself. But say they become successful with it. I'll dive into it in a minute.
Before you even say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I want to know whether or not.
I'd love to ask. Before we dive into the details there and what I sort of think. Do you think, Faisal, that the Square Wallet will have the traction? Because I think a lot of times decisions will get made based on what you see, right? You can only decide on what you see. And if there is really a market across the whole world on order on your phone, pick up at the marketplace or what have you, is that going to work in other cultures? I mean, are people? That whole flow, a lot has to happen, right? The order has to get delivered successfully. A lot of times, most of the time here, it's fax machines in restaurants and cafes, at least with Grubhub and Seamless now merged. Do you think, Faisal, it's inevitable that order on your phone, pick up at the restaurant and cafe are going to happen in Asia, in the Middle East, in Europe? I mean,
absolutely. I think it's happening over here, but there's one slight difference. It's not driven by a specific vendor per se. It's been driven by the banks who have somehow come to the table and say, let's have a wallet application that allows you to pay, and food services just happen to be a part and parcel of it. I think Square, when they came out with the dongle, they tapped into a market that no one was tapping into. Essentially the unmerchants, so to speak, if I could use that word. But with the wallet, it was sort of forcing you to go and, say, okay, let's make this successful. They were already wallet players. They didn't have a walled garden. They didn't have an ecosystem on which they could bank on. But outside the U.S., I think food payment systems are going to be huge, absolutely huge, because they're smaller markets nonetheless. I mean, you're not going to have an app to do food services across Europe.
Is it common in your area? I mean, do you actually use these services and
like delivery.com?
Well, we don't have delivery.com, but we do have food portals. We can order online. We can order through the mobile. Food is delivered. It is a normal way of eating today.
How often, like in your life, would you say you use something like that?
Today, Sunday, twice. I just had my dinner. It was delivered.
Wow. Wow, you're ahead of the curve, Faisal.
You are early adopter.
This week, perhaps about, 8, 10 times.
And what actually is happening there? You're ordering it. Is it showing up as a fax or is it showing up as an email?
No. So we have a mobile app. We have a mobile app. We go through it. It has all the restaurants on it. Just go, my kids say we want to eat this. Okay, Chinese it is. We choose the Chinese restaurant. The menu's there. We order the food. Book, done. That's it.
What app are you using?
It's called Food Panda.
Panda. Now that's regional to your area, because I haven't seen it out here.
It's a company, a German company called Rocket Internet, and
Rocket. Okay, yeah.
And Rocket decided to go into the emerging markets rather than the developed markets. So Food Panda is an application that's used in India, Pakistan, and a couple of other countries, Philippines, Thailand, and now they're slowly expanding everywhere else. And it's because it takes into consideration the intense and immense population density, the traffic delays, the ability to, the inability to go sit in your car, go get the food, parking, etc. So the food delivery services is already huge in Asia. I mean, it was there before perhaps Columbus even discovered America.
Yeah, it's funny. Rocket Internet doesn't have the best reputation across the valley, to say the least.
Yeah.
Where? Yeah.
But it does. It is tremendously valuable.
No, but Rocket Internet is doing so much in the developing world. It's not even funny. I mean, they find
things. They find things that maybe worked a little bit in the U.S. and then they expand upon them in Europe and the developing world, and they're phenomenal about it.
Very simple. They copy.
Yeah.
They're the Chinese Germans. Let me put it this way.
They'll copy and then get bought
too. I mean,
yeah.
And if it works, I mean, they have names like Kamudi. Kamudi is some African name for auction, and it's basically eBay. They have something called Lamudi, which is the equivalent of Amazon. And then they have something else, which is for rent.com or rental.com or apartments.com. So same thing, same concept. But immensely popular here, except the fact that the payment portion is a little late, but it's coming.
What's the technology stack at the merchant? Is it a fax machine or an email or somebody knocking at the door? How do they get the delivery?
SMS.
Notice.
SMS comes on your phones. They have 2 or 3 phones which get the SMS. You have an order, and you log
at the business,
and you log into, and you have an app on your phone, or you can log into the website through the merchant area and find out what your orders are.
Huh?
Brilliantly simple.
Love that.
Using existing stack. That's awesome. So, Mike, you've known about ordering systems a little bit. You've touched upon that area, and what do you think about Square taking all this talent and money and time and focusing on restaurant ordering in this space?
It's funny. I think Square, Brian, and you'd agree to some extent here, is they had an enormous explosion with something that was just truly remarkable, and that was the dongle, right? And they hit mass tier 5, low income, low volume merchants, right? A lot of the farmers market guys. But then there's an incredible need to move up market, move vertically, horizontally, just expand and grow as quick as you can. And that was the model they chose, right? But I think inherently there's going to be a salesperson that needs to go and explain to a merchant. Right now, currently, there's not merchants, searching for this in any mass capacity. They're not going online. They're not trying to find new technology to integrate into their already insanely hectic lifestyle, right? They don't perceive it as a problem that customers can't come and order ahead of the time. But yet there's tremendous volume of capital, venture capital going into companies. DoorDash actually just a couple days ago raised $17 million. They do it a bit different.
Pretty shocked about that.
I think, there's multiple components to it. I think the true difference in a lot of these companies is the vision of what they're actually building. I think one of the most interesting is Postmates, which is building essentially the real world API, right? If you want something delivered, you can have it delivered and you can have it done. It's essentially what TaskRabbit has moved towards, more towards that on-demand delivery service. And I think they'll be very successful because they're not just food delivery. They're not just one component. They're more of a infrastructure baseline. But then you have companies like Sprig raised $11 million, Spoon Rocket 11, Caviar raised 15.
Spoon Rocket, yeah.
Munchery raised 28. So there's a lot of players that are almost evenly funded. There's no one who has, over 50 million in the space other than Grubhub and Seamless, and those are already well established, and very specialized companies.
How does one attack that? Yeah,
Well,
I mean, Grubhub and Seamless are notorious for their amazing sales channels. I mean, I've run into them out in the field with merchants, and I gotta say that they are 3 to 5 years ahead of a lot of people.
I think that's you asked what really separates people, and I think it's almost the contradiction of the SF mentality, which is it's not necessarily the technology. There's no technology I think you could build that would truly resonate with people far above, and when I say people, I mean merchants, far above what the simple scroll on your phone, order, place the order, pay, pick it up. I mean, that in itself should be in every merchant. The problem is anyone could build that. I built it. Right, we built it at FlowTab. It's not very complex technology, but it's hugely. If you look at the user experience now compared to where it should be, it's a huge step up. So the question now becomes for Square, with all those dollars, all those really incredibly talented engineers, designers, what can you do to differentiate on the technology? Because you guys are not sales is not in their DNA, and that's why, frankly, I was surprised to see them move in that direction because it's really not in their DNA.
So you've had the School of Hard Knocks in this, and I've read your paper, and you so graciously opened up the company to a lot of the decisioning that you made, right?
We did.
Could you give three? And I know Square insiders listen to this show and kind of take notes on it, and I get reviews quite a bit from a lot of my friends there. What would be the three top things? The ones that I'm not public enemy number one to, but I mean, I love the company. And, but coming back to this, it's like, what would the three things you would tell the chief PM product, or let's call him an editor? I don't know what they're calling him this week, but the guy that's responsible for building this out, this diminished Square wallet in a sense. What would you say from your experiences?
Well, I look at it from where they are right now, right? And right now they've chosen to go they've built a product around cafes, small restaurants. That's where it's inherently started. It has to start somewhere. You can't build a product from scratch for everyone. You can move in different directions once you have something working, but that's where they've chosen to start. And where the order application for Square goes is it goes towards small restaurants, cafes. Order Ahead is a direct competitor. I think they've raised well over 10 million from some fantastic investors, and they're doing essentially the same thing. And what I think it comes down to is distribution, right? We met with one of our investors at FlowTab, incredibly smart guy, and he said that exactly. He said, "You guys are going to either live or die by distribution. Distribution is a fancy word of saying sales, and I think they need a platform for distributing order that is just light years above everyone else because they're late to the game. They really are, right? These guys, the other guys have been thinking about this. You have even new guys in Cover, PayDragon, some of these guys with a couple $1 million. They've been thinking about it for many years now. So I would look at it and say, where are the places outside of SF? How do you split up your market, right? How do you look at it and say, this is all the cafes. What makes a cafe different? Maybe their point of sale system. Are they running pen and paper, Excel lists? Do they have a simple, T500 merchant terminal? Do they have what are they using, right? Do they have micros, and does that stop them? And then I'd also break it up into saying what else could stop you or make you successful. And I think honestly, Faisal, Brian, it comes down to the culture of the establishment. One of the things we learned at FlowTab is that how do we sort of split up our market into culture fits? Because it's a tremendous difference when you go into a place and you say to a merchant, you say, hey, I've got this new product. It's going to make your life better, faster, stronger, whatever it is, right? It's going to bring you more customers, more money, whatever the pitch is. The number one component to whether it goes in that merchant successfully or not is their personality, right? If you look at Level Up and you look at the places that Level Up works great in, the merchants love it. They love having Level Up because they just like the idea of having it, right? They're just excited about it, right? So I think a lot of people jump to San Francisco and they say that's where all the merchants love this new technology, and partially right, but there's also a lot of resistance. There's a lot of cash-only cafes. There's a lot more on average, percentage-wise, than there are in the rest of the states. So I think I wouldn't necessarily jump there.
Now, Mike, how would you start a company that would require, let's call it a $499 investment in an iPad, and let's call it now, I don't know what the Square stand is now, down to $59 at Best Buy or some of the other stores. It was originally $399. Would you feel that you could successfully simultaneously convince a merchant, number one, you need an ordering system that you don't have. Number two, you need to put your menu up there. Number three, you need to replace your cash register in an internal ordering system. And number four, your credit card merchant processing. Do you think that through Google click-through ads or telemarketers from
No.
maybe the Philippines, do you think you can convince those merchants?
The answer is no. It's not even a question. The answer is no.
You can only convince them to do one thing, right? I mean,
right.
You can only convince
Brian,
them
here's
to do
the reason,
ordering
right?
Or credit
This
card.
is such an important thing in their business, and their businesses are lives. They live in these buildings. If you want to call them up and say, hey, I need to rip out your DNA and change it, right? Or like, I need to give you a new liver. They want you to be there. They think, and they're right in saying that this decision is so big and so important that every minute detail matters, and you deserve to show up at my door. I deserve for you to be here and show you it if I'm going to write you a check. And honestly, I think...
Now, when did you learn that?
We tried it at FlowTab.
Did you learn it in real time? Did you
I'll tell you
sense
this.
it? When did you sense that was a
at
big
FlowTab,
thing?
we were in our apartment in San Francisco with 3 guys, and we hired this firm. It was called Callbox, and Callbox would call all the bars. We wrote a script. They were great. It failed. It failed instantly. We ran it for about 10 days. No one. And you can listen to these calls, and they were just brutal, right? It was like banging your head against the wall. So that's just not going to work.
And let me tell you, call some great Filipino operators.
They're great. They're great.
Great operators. So it's not. But the problem is, every startup I've ever come to will ultimately get the Filipino operator or a New Delhi operator service that do these call outs. And Square's experimenting with this stuff, and I know it because I have merchants calling me saying, I got this call
Here's what
from
I do
Square.
think will work. I think if you go and approach a merchant with something they don't necessarily need to replace something that they already have, they can add it on. And I think there's an interesting company called Belly, which approaches it from the loyalty side. And loyalty is, it's a bit mucky now, and it's sort of feeling of the word. But I think there is a large opportunity, a lot of noise. A lot of people are not really addressing the core problems. I think Belly does. I think Belly's got a great sales strategy. I think they have a good implementation. And what they can do with all of these essentially educated merchants and hardware and software and educated consumers on the other side is they can flip the switch, right? And they've already started to experiment with this and have payments integrated and have ordering ahead. So I think that would be an intelligent way to get into a lot of merchants at once and then build something and release it amongst all of them.
So I call this empirical praxis to the dissuading views of a lot of my distractors. But what you just did right here, I think earns you a chief editor function within Square. I can tell you that how this product was. I'm serious. I mean, why they don't hire you or somebody with empirical praxis is beyond me. And you'll see me browbeating them as long as they're around, because I think it's the most ridiculous thing they've done. Here you have this product that I already see having the problems that you're talking about. And I've lived through this for 30 years, right? And it's like, are you going to simultaneously tell a merchant 5 things at once? Because they're barely listening to one half of what you're telling them. And you're saying you need to replace hardware, you need to replace cash register, credit card relationships. All of these things are very sensitive. And, my problem is, and I think you've already identified, is that you're almost guaranteed, even with the best sales force, to fail and to fail miserably. And I don't want to jinx the product negatively, but I mean, how many people have been stuck in this? How many people?
A lot, because the problem's obvious. The solution's not. Right. The solution in its detailed executionable fashion is not obvious. You can't just build something. And there's a lot. And Brian, this is an important note too. Is there's a lot of pressure on the guys at Square because they have a lot of money, they have a lot of visibility, but they're still using the same tools I am. They're still in Sketch and Photoshop and Sublime and Tower and Git, and they're not using any magical formulas. So they have the same tools. They have a ton of pressure, probably a lack of knowledge, overinflated ambition, but also they have a lot of leverage to do something really powerful. So I think there's a lot of pressure. There's always just guys in a room making decisions, just like you and I.
Mike and Faisal, they have the ability today, right now, to truly change the world of payments. I fully believe that. I believe that the direction they're going in is fatally flawed. And if they continue to create Me Too products to try to, yet again, a thing that hundreds have tried to attack and have failed, they're going to have the same results. What is the definition? How many times you have to hit the wall and realize that that's the wrong way to do things? It is tough. It's tough, but I believe that there's creativity within that company. I've seen it. I know it. I don't necessarily feel that that's leading the company. As transparent as they are, people are afraid to speak up. They're afraid to get out of groupthink. And I wrote a piece about this, and it was my sort of ode to my frustrated colleagues inside that company, that they can't speak their mind and say the emperor's naked. They can't say that this is a dumb idea. And frankly, a lot of them are very upset because Wallet got canceled. I mean, I knew about it quite a bit in advance that it was coming. And my hope was for them to have reiterated it in a correct manner. Unfortunately, they lost the will. And we don't have a wallet now. They'll
never disappear, right? Your Square is not going to. There's no creator is just too large. And I think what we also have to keep in mind is the relative investment of these things, right? For Square's overall headcount and cash burn, and this may not be a big of a deal as we sort of chalk it up to be, right? It may only be 5-10 guys working on something. And may have like $1 million, $2 million a year burn. It's not. It may not be a big investment. It's a big thing publicly.
I would be opposite. And culturally, internally in that company, it has demoralized that company. And I don't know if there's a chance that they're ever going to quite get over it. I'm pretty firm about that. I think they invested emotionally and mentally and physically in so much of this. I mean, you got to recognize Jack Dorsey and Howard Schultz were talking on the biggest media channels on the planet about a new way to pay. That's billions of dollars, maybe even trillions of dollars of free advertising. They have successfully extracted that from the company's narrative now. And now it's sort of like the consumer was ready for this, right? I had people in the middle of nowhere saying, I saw Jack Dorsey on 60 Minutes. I'm waiting for this thing to come to my local grocery store. And that is a letdown, and you could never repair. That's why, if you were to consult me, I would say, guys, don't go on TV and start saying this stuff yet.
Howard Schultz leave the Square board? Was there a definitive sort of?
I can't tell you.
If someone were to guess,
but I can tell you this: nobody
sinking ship.
Nobody goes onto a board. Nobody like Howard Schultz goes on a board of directors for less than or about a year. With the idea that they were going to leave a year later. That this does not happen. Not for the premise. The premise was Howard brings unique perspectives to Square, and we're going to utilize that to really grow our business. A year later, he's gone. A year later, all the Square readers are out the door. They literally were thrown in a dumpster. I have the memo. I won't publish it. Throw them away. Try to give them away in a basket. Right. Nobody would take them. So there was let me tell you this. There's no doubt, and it will come out, hopefully, and I think it's important it does. There's a negativity that was brewing within that company. And Howard is a survivor. All right, he's a long-termer, and he's a brilliant, brilliant businessman. And all I can tell you is I think his instincts told him something that he didn't want to be there for X event, whatever that X event is going to be, or N number of months before X event takes place. And so he got out of there. And what did Howard do? Within 30 days, he went public in an investor conference call and said that Starbucks is going to get involved in payments as a CEO
Is that a
function.
causation or correlation?
And then 3 months later, hey, there you go. Interesting. And then he goes out and says, we're going to consider licensing our technology to companies who have already contacted us about payments, mobile wallets, and transactions. And I can tell you unofficially that they've already done that, and it's already in testing.
Let me ask you this.
And I'm going
Faisal, who do you think is doing more in
Yes.
transaction volume in 5 years, Square or Starbucks Mobile Payments Co. Enterprises?
I think between the two, probably neither. Probably PayPal will still be on top.
PayPal for life. All right, we've got about
Faisal,
we've got about 5 minutes left here. We had an amazing podcast last week with Chris Larson, the CEO of Ripple and Ripple Labs. What do you guys think? I mean, coming out of that, there's a lot of. He's obviously playing in a very complex world, a very high stakes world. What do you think about the show? About where he goes from here?
Well, I think it was a great show. I think he gave a great overview of what he thought Ripple is, something that a lot were confused about. It's clearly that Ripple is B2B. They're not going to go the consumer route. They plan to do mostly with money transfer operators or central banks or regional banks or nationwide banks, and sort of bring them on board with the Ripple protocol for payments. Whether or not that's the right route or not remains to be seen, because traction is the end game. But I also heard a rumor, and this is just a rumor, that Ripple may be applying for money transmitter licenses, or probably already are filed for money transmitter licenses.
Wow.
If that is the case, then that sort of really changes the game. They need traction, and they need traction really, really fast. I know that if they, I'm going to speculate it nonetheless. If they don't get decent
how would that play out? How would that play out, those money transmitters?
For money transmitters, if they're looking at cross-border, because that's where their main foray is. I mean, that's their main point. You can do cross-border transactions, settle instantly. Parties who are across the board, outside the U.S., who are wanting to do business with partners within the U.S., they need to have a money transmitter license. Some of the parties some of the existing banks may say, well, we're a small bank, we're a community bank, we don't have a national charter. We don't have the money transmitter licenses for 50 states. We're just a community bank. So someone has to supply that license. And if Ripple comes into play, maybe they'll do it themselves. Maybe they'll make money on that. But it's now, to me, a pure game of getting traction and getting clients on board. And the sooner they do that, the better off they'll be. You can get all the good guys on your board and advisory teams, etc. But they missed out, in my opinion, on the consumer market, and consumer market gives them the much needed traction, which they're not going to get. So B2B is going to be a challenge.
So how would you have attacked the consumer market? Say, let's just say they put you, it was 2 years ago, and they put you in front of this. Would you have organized Ripple as a company differently? Would you have communicated the message differently?
Well, I would have done the same thing what Circle did, or Coinbase did, or BitPay did, except there was no risk over here for a cryptocurrency. I could hold dollars, I could hold Japanese yen, I could hold British pounds, and I could trade across the world. I'd make sure there'd be an incentive to become a market maker. I'd go, partner up with credit card companies, prepaid debit card companies, and make them gateways so I can, get the money onto my debit card, etc. They've done none of that. So when they've essentially closed doors to the consumer market, the number of players in the B2B market is very small, and it's not easy asking a bank to switch on to the Ripple protocol and come on board and let's start working on that. Fider Bank in Germany was one of the I think the first banks to sign up.
Yeah,
but that's just one case. Is Bank of America on it? No. Is Chase? JP Morgan Chase on it? No. Is Barclays on it? No. Is RBS on it? No. So so many banks are not on it. So who are they going to start with? They have to start with the smaller guys. And
so they're beholden to the bank at this point, and they don't have control of the consumer space and the consumer-facing aspect of their business.
So as an end user, a consumer, to me, Ripple Wallet loses its charm. I'd rather go back to the Bitcoin, ecosystem back. And with Circle coming into play right now, I think they've done a fantastic job.
Spread some light on that, because I know we are coming to the edge of time, but Circle is very fascinating. We probably do at least a show on some of these
I think if you look at Jeremy Allaire's introductory video where he sits himself in front of the computer and does the entire walkthrough, I think it's enough to convince any novice,
brilliant.
Yeah, any person that Bitcoin is the thing to have for payments. And juxtapose that, or if you were to elaborate, extrapolate that same technology into the payments world of, say, remittances, etc. I think they've got a solid case. So it's going to give Ripple a very tough time.
Do you see that video sort of resonating in your communities that you're?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
I wouldn't be surprised if that video gets more coverage than the ones that's made by the bitfilms.org. Who make all these Bitcoin videos. But I think this particular video addresses everything instantly, especially the part where, people are saying, well, if I keep Bitcoins, the price keeps fluctuating. Do I lose my money, et cetera, et cetera? And that's the cool part they've done. They said, well, we keep your money in US dollars. We don't keep them in Bitcoin. We only use that during the time of the transaction.
Yeah. And it really was greatly, thought out. Yeah, just a wonderful video. I've actually sent a lot of people in that direction. So this is interesting. So you're looking at Ripple actually from a much different perspective with the money transmitter licenses.
So if I were to give an opinion on Ripple, from a buy, it's on a hold.
Until what's the trigger?
That'll be our new rating system.
What's your trigger? When is it a buy?
I can't. It's not a buy now. It's on a hold. And if they don't do something very fast, very soon, probably go and sell.
It's bold.
Wow.
All right, guys.
Okay, that's our new rating system for now on. Buy, sell, hold on all these companies.
I love it. Let's talk about Circle again next time. And also, for our listeners, we would love to have requests. So send Brian Feisel or myself a message on Quora or Twitter, and we'd love to integrate some of your ideas into the show. Until next time, guys.
And
be critical. Yes, yes.
Be critical.
All right, guys. Until next time. It was a great one.
Take care. Nice talking.
You guys take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.